In this video, I tell you about the murder of Danielle Jennings in her own apartment. Then I take you to the crime scene. Welcome to True Crime Beyond. The residents of Norcross, Georgia in 1999 were made to witness a terrifying murder when Danielle Jennings was found murdered in her bed in her apartment. Her fiance, Louis Piano, he claimed he found her in a position after returning back from work in the evening time, and when he found her, he immediately called the police. And this investigation of this murder was actually documented in ID's American Nightmare, Watch Your Back. And it chronicles this horrific murder and shows really the investigation that went into it and honed in on the killer. So let's talk about the case. Danielle Jennings was described as this down-to-earth person who loved, helping people, spreading a smile to everybody on the outside. She and her little boy, had the perfect life. She was looking forward to a bright future with her fiance. She had just gotten engaged. Neighbors around talked about her in this kind, generous way, revealing that she was pretty friendly with everybody she came across. It was quite shocking when it was found out that she was murdered in her own apartment. So on March 15th, 1999, Danielle's fiance, Louis Piano, returned around 5 p.m. to find her collapsed on her bed. Once authorities arrived, they declared Danielle dead and found that she had a ligature mark around her neck. Moreover, the bed as well as the drawer nearby were completely messed up, were ransacked through. The attackers also seemingly went through the victim's purse and the contents, and all those things were scattered on the floor, so it was a kind of a messy situation. Surprisingly, nothing of value was missing. The police were not able to find any sign of forced entry. Later in the autopsy, it was determined that Danielle Jennings was asphyxiated to death. The initial investigation into Danielle's murder was relatively slow. The police had no leads to work with. The autopsy was unable to offer any clues other than the cause of death. There was no DNA evidence that they could track. But they were unwilling to give up. I mean, this young girl, beautiful young girl who, was at the dawn of her life with her family. So they sat through numerous interviews and slowly built up a line of suspects. On the other hand, when Louis Piano was questioned, he had mentioned that he had an alibi for the time of this murder and thus was, exempted and ruled out of the investigation. Unfortunately, even the suspect list got the police nowhere, and everyone on it had valid alibis. Right when the detectives found themselves back on square one, a surprise witness gave a statement that became a breakthrough, the breakthrough that they were looking for. And according to the testimony, one of Danielle's neighbors called the police and revealed that the week before the murder, she was suddenly visited by a strange man who claimed to be there for maintenance. The neighbor felt quite uneasy for the entire time the man stayed in her apartment, and later found it strange that someone would come for maintenance without being called. And surprisingly, other women in the same apartment complex came up with similar complaints and complained that they were all visited by that same guy. Once the guy went away after doing work, many residents found valuables and weapons missing, things that, he obviously stole. And so the police had a hunch that this person might be involved in the murder, and so they asked witnesses to describe this maintenance worker. And the description fit the worker by the name of Calvin Oliver. Oliver in custody, the police raided his home and found multiple stolen items, which helped them charge the suspect with burglary. And Danielle's fiance was also contacted by the authorities and claimed that Danielle's engagement ring was missing. And, to no one's surprise, the engagement ring was found in Oliver's possession, and the police wasted no time charging him. So Calvin Oliver was found guilty of the murder as well as burglary, and he's currently spending life in prison with an additional 20 years for the burglary. Now, what's interesting about this case is not only the circumstances surrounding the murder, but also the apartment itself. And as we proceed with the video, you'll see how this apartment was really in a prime location for a crime to take place. Because I went to the crime scene, and this is what I saw. So as we drill down into this crime scene, the first thing we notice, it takes place outside of Atlanta. And if you know anything about Atlanta, there's this perimeter that surrounds it. And to the northeast side of this, outside of this perimeter, is Gwinnett County. And as you drill down even further, we see that this crime took place actually in Norcross. At the time, all of this was Norcross. It's now split into Norcross and Peachtree Corners. But at the time of the crime, this was actually Norcross. And so I want to draw your attention to this major highway that comes to the northeast out in Gwinnett County. And off of this major highway is this street here that, as you can see, has tons and tons of apartment complexes that line both sides of it. And it's a very densely populated area of Gwinnett County, of Norcross actually. And it's not a great place. There's some crime in here, so years after the crime, this area's gotten to be not so great. But there's a lot of apartment complexes up and down the street. Down here, closer to this major highway, there's this more industrial area that have office buildings and warehouses and stuff like that. But when you go to the west of this major street here, there's this other street here, this kind of side road, where you see some other more apartment complexes here and here and here. There's three. There's some housing back in here, but for the most part, you have these apartment complexes here. And as you can see, this is actually the apartment complex that the crime took place. And back in the time of the crime, this was called Ashley Lakes. It's no longer called Ashley Lakes, which is kind of typical of apartment complex that's 30 years old. It'll sometimes change ownership, and it'll get a renovation, and they'll change the name of the apartment complex. But during the time of the crime, this was Ashley Lakes. And what's interesting is all the streets in here, they're named after Ashley Lakes. They're Ashley Lakes Drive, Ashley Lake Road, and so it still has the identity of Ashley Lakes, even though it's not called that anymore. You see here, this is the entrance of the apartment complex, and you can see this kind of pretty strongly in the crime scene video that the police take. But yeah, so this is the apartment complex that the crime took place, and as you can see, it took place over here on this front section of apartment buildings. But I do want to draw your attention to this tree line here, because I think this is significant, because this tree line, obviously, it separates this apartment complex from this other apartment complex over here. And so you can see there's nothing really going on over here, right? There's no foot traffic, there's no cars passing by over here. And it's this is looking at the back of the apartments of this other apartment complex. And so I think that's significant when we think about the crime actually took place over here. And so we'll look at that a little further as we go through the video. So let's go ahead and drill down into the street view to see this a little bit more in detail, what it looks like from the front of the building. So as you see, this street view actually still has the same exterior look as the apartment did in the crime scene video that the police took, 20 plus years ago. And so it's got this exposed kind of brown brick combined with this exterior green siding. And so you see that pretty prevalent in the crime scene video. That obviously looks a little bit different today since they've changed the ownership of the apartment complex, and it's gone a little bit of a exterior renovation. So you'll see a different color scheme there, but you can kind of tell what this looks like. And when I go through, when I try to identify crime scenes from a television show, obviously I'm looking for landmarks, right? And so the first thing I noticed when I came in here, I noticed the architectural look of the building looked exactly the same. It was just a little bit different, but in terms of the exterior color, but it looked exactly the same. All the landmarks were there, and we'll look at more landmarks on the back side of this building. That gives you kind of a real good idea that we're in the right place. But I do also want to draw your attention to from the outside, from the front, you can only see this top level, on this level here of apartments in this building, but there's actually a third level underneath here. And I will say I think that also adds to the reason why this crime took place, is because it's kind of isolated down here. There's a third apartment down here that really is only accessible, back here, obviously. But I do also want to draw your attention lastly to this staircase here that leads to like a walkway. And this is really the only way you can get into these apartments from this side over here. And so you can almost imagine how isolated this is, but it's even more isolated when you get down to this bottom level that we'll look at a little further in the video. So as we look at the back of the building, I want to first draw your attention to the 3 levels of apartments in each building. As we mentioned in the Google View portion, that you can only see the first 2 levels from the front of the building, but as you can see, there's a third level of apartments in each building there on the bottom. And this is the actual apartment that the crime took place in. So as we scan over, I just want to call your attention to a few things. First thing I want to call your attention to is this retaining wall that you'll see a lot of in upcoming scenes, and I think it plays a big role in the reason why the crime took place. Also want to draw your attention to this two-toned exterior that's the same color scheme from the Google Street View, so it hasn't changed much since 20 plus years ago when the crime took place. So you have this exposed brownish brick and this greenish siding, and then also this decking, this walkway, if you will, that leads from the parking lot all the way across the side of the building and up into these apartments. And then you'll see that a staircase leads down into this area, which is the location of this apartment where the crime took place. So as we give you a view of the modern day look, as you can see, there's the 3 levels of apartments. This is the apartment where the crime took place, and then as you can see, the color scheme's a little different, right? As we saw in the one image earlier, this kind of gives you a better view of it from the back side, where you have the painted brick, kind of a grayish color, and then you have the painted siding, which is more of a slate color. So that gives you a really good view. And then you see the walkway decking leading into the apartment entrances, and then you see the ever-present retaining wall over here, which now has been renovated. It's been redone, but obviously we'll look at that a little bit later. Some of the things that I always look at again is landmarks. So the retaining wall is a landmark that I look for that's very prominent. Also, this electric meter box, you'll see that when it's in the side-by-side, which is next. This pedestal, this box right here, this is new, but these things are landmarks that we notice when we're looking at the episodes and looking at the new updated scenes. So if you look at a side-by-side, here you go. Here's the modern day, here's the old look, and as you can see, the landmarks, you see that electricity meter box is right there. You see this pedestal is right here. It's kind of exposed here, but it's still there. You see this beige color box still there. This is new. You can also see, back 20 plus years ago, I'm not sure how new this apartment complex was, but the grass was all the way filled in all the way around here. You can see it's worn quite a bit around here. You can even see this balcony railing is kind of worn out. You also see here the walkway and the decking into the apartment entrances. So when we're looking at the landmarks, it's very obvious that this is the actual crime scene. So let's move forward. So here we're looking at the side of the building, right on top of the retaining wall, looking down into the entrance of the apartment where the crime took place. And this gives you kind of an idea, a vision of how dark it can be. Even in the daytime, you see how dark it is. And maybe at nighttime, you have these lights that light up. But I would imagine it's still pretty dark. So that kind of gives you an idea of how dark it is down there. You can only imagine coming down these stairs, especially when it's real dark. You know how daunting it might be to walk down these stairs, not knowing what's around the corner. So that could be an issue there. And I want to draw your attention over here to this door because I will say currently it's not an apartment. The episode makes mention or implies that this is another apartment opposite to this apartment here, which is where the crime took place. But as you can see in other videos, this door is actually padlocked from the outside. And so that's currently not a door that leads into another apartment. And I'll even suggest that even during the crime scene time, that it wasn't an apartment either, because in the crime scene video, you can see toys lined up in front of this door. And if this was an apartment, you wouldn't stack toys along this entrance here. So I don't think that's ever been an apartment. So here's another view atop from the retaining wall. And this is really an image that kind of gives you an idea of how limited the line of sight is. So looking down into the apartment entrance from this angle here, there's not a whole lot you can see. You can't see back in here. Even if you were standing right here, you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see the entrance to the door to the apartment. And so just another image, or just another way to see how desolate it is to be down here, right? The line of sight is really limited, and so if you're standing up here and something was going on over here, you couldn't see it even if you wanted to. And finally, this is just like a wide angle view of this side of the building. Here's the retaining wall. Here's the stairs down into the apartment entrance. Here's some of our landmarks over here. And here's the long walkway into the entrances to the apartments on this side of the building. This one goes up to the next level. This is the second level, and this leads to the staircase that leads down to this one apartment that's down over here. So just to give you an idea. And the next thing I'm going to take you on is I'll take you on this walk all the way from this entrance, from the parking lot, all the way walking through it and around and down into this apartment entrance. And I do want to draw your attention to this tree line, and we mentioned that when we were looking at the Google view of it from the top. And this is just this tree line that separates this apartment complex with the other apartment complex. And you can see there's no one back here. There's no one that's going to happen to be walking by when this crime is taking place. There's no one that's going to necessarily even hear you. As if something happened up here, you might have somebody walking by. You might even hear from the other apartment. But this is the only apartment down here. There's nobody walking by. And so really just a recipe for a crime to take place. So as you can see, here we are on these steps leading to this walkway. And as you can see here, you see the view that we had by this retaining wall we just looked at. And so this is walking up into the complex, or the building area. That's really the only way down to that lower apartment. And we'll kind of pause it along the way, and we'll kind of check and see what's going on. And again, as you can see, this is the one apartment they said in the episode that this was another apartment, but again, as you can see, this is dead bolted from the outside. So this is currently a looks like a utility closet or utility room, and I would say even 20 years ago it's probably a utility room, because as you can see in some of the footage, you see like toys just kind of stacked along here, and you wouldn't do that. I guess if someone's staying there, you'd keep this clear. But it looks like some of the toys were lined up against this wall here. So which kind of gives me the idea that it was probably not used as an apartment. Yeah, so as we go along here, walking down, you can see it's kind of gotten run down over the years. I mean, there's a lot of trash here, maybe typical of, a 20 or 30 year old apartment complex in an area that's not all that great anyways. The area that we're in current day is not all that great of an area, and I'm not sure, 20 years ago it's probably a little bit better, but over the years it's gotten bad. You see trash just lined up there. You see this is apartment 1217. The apartment right below it on the next, the lower level is 1216, which is the scene of the crime. And so 1217 is there, 18 there. And as we walk down here, you can kind of tell. You can even see like how maybe daunting this is just to walk down here, especially at nighttime. If it's not lit up as much, I'm not sure how much it was lit up back then. And I will say that this crime took place, in the daytime. So that's not necessarily a key to this crime, but you can imagine how scary it might be to walk down into this and not knowing who might be around the corner, especially nowadays, present day, as this area is not all that great of an area. So you see prominently the retaining wall there. You can see the image there of our landmarks here. As we look back, again, there's the, you can see it's dead bolted right there, right, from the outside. And so I don't even know if that even works here. So, but it's again, it's kind of gotten old and decrepit over the years. And you see trash outside of this. And as you can see, there's 1216, and that's another landmark that we look for. And in the episode, you can see it's changed, obviously, but it is 1216. Marking on the number is different, but it's 1216. But again, it looks like it could be a little daunting coming down here at night, and even being down here by yourself. You got people up here in this area, but you're the only one down here, and you can only imagine when this happened at lunchtime or whatever it was, and she walked in on some guy in her apartment. Even if she screamed, like, how many people would hear that? Down here in this area, down here, kind of all alone and isolated. I think that may have something to do with that. As you can see, here's the tree line, right, that we talked about, and there's the other complex. So there's nothing over here, right? No one's gonna hear her. No one's gonna see anything around here, right? And so it's just really kind of a creepy situation here, kind of a desolate situation.